Deep in the Berkshire countryside sits one of Britain's most feared institutions.
My first impression was, this is a prison.
Broadmoor Hospital.
It's notorious because of who's there.
A place where dangerous men are sent when there's nowhere else for them to go.
You are dealing with people who carry a substantial risk of harm to the public.
There's always that risk that violence might erupt.
This is the inside story, told by those who've worked behind its walls.
One patient suddenly turned on me and said, the trouble with you is that you won't let me be mad.
Those once detained here.
My behaviour was psychotic. My voices were daring me to trust them.
And by the most notorious of all.
He called me Bob, and I called him Peter.
This is a call from Broadmoor Hospital.
Secretly recorded and speaking from beyond the grave.
But why abandon it, is it? We're not allowed that. They're paranoid about everything. You'll be surprised, you won't believe it here.
This is the story of how to care for Britain's most dangerously unwell.
It can be sometimes very scary. There's a risk, there's no two ways about it.
Quite surreal. I've never looked at Broadmoor from this perspective before. I spent a lot of time looking out of that fence. This is the first time I've ever looked through it. My life was a car crash, up and down like a roller coaster. I had become very unwell, responding to auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations. So many different things came together in a perfect storm that saw me being a patient in here. I spent 7 years here. An asylum is a safe place. The wall isn't just to keep people from escaping, it's to keep the madness that exists in the world out.
"40 miles from London, perched on a hill above the village of Crowthorne, sits Broadmoor, a psychiatric hospital like no other.
You look out, you think, what a beautiful view. Countryside, calmness, seeing the green. It was stunning, to be honest with you, you know?
Broadmoor's set in these lovely grounds and there's a long drive up to it. But then when Broadmoor actually appears in front of you, it's quite an intimidating place. There's a huge wall that appears like a blanket wrapped around it. Is it protecting them from us or us from them? I wasn't ever sure.
These walls hold some of the country's most dangerously unwell offenders, men with mental illness and personality disorders. Some a danger to others, some just a danger to themselves.
There's a very foreboding feeling that you're going in, and how long this place has been there, who it has housed, not only murderers, but people totally, totally insane. You have this feeling in Broadmoor. It is fear.
I think my first impression was, this is a prison, not a hospital.
Today, Broadmoor is home to over 200 men, and for decades, it's treated some of Britain's most notorious criminals.
Ronnie Cray, one of the two Cray brothers, spent a good deal of time at Broadmoor. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. Kenneth Erskine, the Stockwell Strangler. Charles Bronson, real name Michael Peterson, spent a goodish time at Broadmoor on the way to being Britain's most famous or notorious prisoner. Michael Adebowale, one of the killers of Lee Rigby. is in Broadmoor. This extraordinary collection of high-profile inmates literally goes on. And that's why it is notorious. It's notorious because of who's there and who they're trying to care for.
Broadmoor's patients are detained under the Mental Health Act and spend their lives living under maximum security. Something which staff experience on a daily basis.
You go through what we call the airlock. So we give up our mobile phones and bags are checked and maybe clothing felt, and on some occasions there's even a nice dog at the gate sniffing for any real contraband. Right from the moment of going in, you're conscious, even as a member of staff, that you're going somewhere slightly different.
I guess deep down I always wanted to work in high secure. I knew that these people, patients, there was nowhere else they could go to be managed, to be treated.
While staff pass in and out of Broadmoor's doors every day, patients like Joshua generally only came in once.
When I arrived at the hospital, quite intimidating when you're stood outside it. Big wooden doors which open up into an airlock, which is a little area between the front doors and the inner doors. So the vehicle you're in will stop inside the airlock. They'll check underneath, make sure no one's clinging on, nothing dodgy going on. Everything is locked in Broadmoor. And if you want to move around the site, permission has to be given by the control room. Now, I've never been in the control room, but I'm told there are a lot of monitors where you can see around the hospital where all the cameras are. So at all times, the hospital knows where all of their patients are.
Many patients who are sent to Broadmoor are unlike those on any other psychiatric hospital ward.
The first thing to remember about patients in Broadmoor is that the vast majority committed a very serious offence. You are dealing with people who, certainly in the severe cases, carry a substantial risk of harm to the public.
One such severe case came to public attention in September 2014.
Got a large, nice sort of machete. You're trying to get into 304, 304. We do have children in these back gardens.
When one man's psychotic breakdown terrorised a street in suburban North London.
There was no doubt that he was intent on killing anything in his path. Nicholas Salvador was a 25-year-old who'd come to this country with his parents from Nigeria in his teens. On the 4th of September 2014, Salvador had a psychotic break. That morning, he'd gone into a cafe and left without paying, and the waiter said later, he seemed very depressed and a bit upset. Well, he certainly was. He was sharing a house in Edmonton. He goes back to the house, takes his shirt off, picks up a machete and a broom handle, walks back out into the street and proceeds to completely lose it. He's exploded. He's like a volcano who's gone off. He's kicking over garden fences, he's leaping over walls, he's threatening. In this rampage, he begins by beheading 2 cats with his machete.
Got a large, nice sort of machete. He's like smashing the premises up. We're evacuating kids from next door.
What set all this off, we really cannot tell. But the tragedy, the awful tragedy of this psychotic break, is the dear lady called Palmyra Silva, who was 82 and who lived just down the road from where Salvador was staying. She sees all this happening and comes out. He simply attacks her viciously, suddenly, out of the blue, stabs her, and then, for no reason whatever, beheads this poor 82-year-old woman. So the police arrive in numbers. It is not easy to subdue Nicholas Salvador.
Received, just have the channel, Renfield, have the channel. He's currently trying to get into 304. We do have children in these back gardens.
The alleged killer was eventually cornered and tasered in the struggle.
He repeated phrases such as "red is the colour" and "I am king." One of the psychiatrists who assessed him after the attack said Salvador thought Mrs. Silva was Hitler in a different form.
This was the ultimate psychotic break, the ultimate explosion of something which had been building up inside him quietly for some time.
What's unusual about this trial is that Nicholas Salvador accepts that he killed Mrs. Silva, but he has pleaded not guilty. He claims he was insane at the time of the killing.
Salvador was actually found not guilty of murder by reasons of insanity, and the Recorder of London, Nicholas Hilliard, actually sent him to Broadmoor.
Most people with mental illness pose no danger to others. But for individuals like Salvador, the symptoms can be severe and deadly.
Many of the homicides committed by someone with mental illness or disorder were because they were maybe hearing command voices which are telling them, oh, you're a bastard, you're no good, go out and kill yourself. Or, occasionally, go out and kill somebody else. Now, they're hearing these voices very, very much as though they're real voices. It can take total control of their thoughts, their moods, their behaviour.
Before he came to Broadmoor, former patient Joshua's auditory hallucinations were dangerously out of control.
My illness had gotten quite bad. My behaviour was psychotic. And I remember driving through Portsmouth in my car, and my voices were daring me to trust them, and I drove at 45 miles an hour straight across the crossroads with a major road in Portsmouth. Now, I'm very glad no one was there, but that was my voices telling me. I still hear voices now. Even recently, in the last 12 months at home, I've been in situations where I've been screaming out loud to tell my voices to F off because they've been winding me up.
For Broadmoor, the first challenge is to safely contain new arrivals who are acutely and dangerously unwell. This happens in the place where all new patients enter, the admissions ward, previously known as Luton Ward. Mental health nurse Paul Deacon worked in admissions.
Admission wards can be very chaotic. All these illnesses that people have under one roof. It's a challenge for them and for the staff, you know? But you learn quickly, you learn. They could present quite differently, really. You could have somebody come in high as a kite, swinging, seriously. You could have somebody who's so depressed and near enough catatonic.
On the admissions ward, all patients are under constant observation because staff need to diagnose their condition and do so quickly.
The absolutely crucial reason for making a diagnosis is to know which treatment to give, especially for somebody who's been very dangerous, because you want to get their symptoms under control as quickly as possible to reduce the risk to them and to those around them.
But many of Broadmoor's patients arrive from prison, and for them, even the turbulent admissions ward can feel like a sanctuary.
I got out of the prison van and I had handcuffs attached to a belt. The nurse who greeted us, the first thing he said was, "Will you take those off?" So they took the handcuffs off and he said, "Take a seat." And then he said, "Oh, would you like a cup of tea?" "Oh, thank you very much." "Would you like a cigarette? Do you smoke? Would you like a cigarette?" "Are you hungry? We'll get you something to eat." And I was thinking, well, this is nice. That really set the scene for what would become the next 7 years of my life.
Most patients can move around the hospital, but new arrivals will stay on the admissions ward for at least 3 to 9 months for a period of intense assessment.
In Luton, we were required to stay in the main room, the day room, all day. And that's how they assess you, because they can watch you from the office.
We would be encouraged to sit with them and try and glean as much as you can out of them by conversation. We were encouraged to interact, see what they wanted to do, chess or anything silly like that.
Another task for staff on the admissions ward is flushing out those who might be trying to fake their way in.
Faking mental illness is actually pretty common amongst people in prison. But most people who think it through probably don't want to go to Broadmoor. I'm well aware of a few exceptions to that.
He had a chap who was in prison, but he knew that it would be easier and quieter for him to act, as he put it, mad and get transferred to Broadmoor. And that's exactly what happened. And when he walked in and he was on the wards, he was mortified, absolutely mortified. He cried to be sent back to prison.
In 1999, one of Britain's most hated men was about to put Broadmoor's admissions process to the test. That April, a wave of vicious bombings rocked the capital.
Emergency services poured onto the streets of Brixton within minutes of the blast.
Finding those responsible for this bomb attack is now the #1 priority of the Metropolitan Police.
Over a period of 2 weeks, bombs ripped through Brixton, Brick Lane, and then Soho.
There had been no warning. The bomb was clearly designed to bring carnage to the streets of the capital on a night when those streets were packed with people out to enjoy themselves.
3 people died, 4 had limbs amputated. I can remember it vividly. It was utterly shocking. One of the people who died was a pregnant mother. London was shocked. At first it was thought that this might be some sort of terrorist organisation, but the police investigation unearthed some CCTV of the Brixton bombing. And in particular, it identified one man as having planted the bomb. David James Copeland.
Copeland confessed to his crimes immediately, but he would soon find an opportunity to try to get away with murder.
His lawyer put in a plea for diminished responsibility. So the courts then have to assess whether he's mad or bad, basically. You know, if he's mad, he's not responsible. If he's bad, he goes to prison. So he was sent to Broadmoor to be assessed.
Author Bernard O'Mahony wrote letters under various pseudonyms to men who'd harmed women and children to ensure they were convicted. He'd previously gained confessions from others before their trials. Now he was determined to prove that Copeland was faking his mental illness.
I invented this name, a name Patsy. So I wrote to him and he wrote back and he clearly developed feelings for him. He was very revealing, really, about himself.
Soon, Copeland was writing regularly from his room on Broadmoor's Luton ward.
As I got to know him through these letters, I could see that he didn't care if he blew up, he just wanted to blow the world up, do you know what I mean?
At Broadmoor, 5 psychiatrists diagnosed Copeland with paranoid schizophrenia, but his letters to Patsy were revealing another side.
He was like critical of the doctors. He was saying this place is a joke. So are the doctors. They think they're clever, but they are as stupid as the fools in here. And then in another letter he's saying, things here are so boring, as usual. Someone keeps writing kill on the walls. What he writes isn't disturbing, but the fact he writes it in his own shit is. This is what this place is like.
Copeland's claims had landed him on a ward with people who really were disturbed. But he was hopeful that his insanity plea would get him a fast track to freedom.
He said, things are not looking too bad for my trial. I could, if I'm lucky, get diminished responsibility, and then it will be up to the doctors when I am released.
But Bernard's net was closing in.
He makes the ultimate mistake on 20th of December 1999. I can't believe that I have fooled all the doctors. And when he wrote that line, it was just, you know, I could have wept with joy, to be honest. Because I knew that was him. He was stuffed. He'd shot himself in the head, never mind the foot.
At Copeland's trial at the Old Bailey, Bernard's Patsy letters were used as evidence to show that he was of sound mind when he planted the bombs.
When the trial happened at the Old Bailey, the public gallery was full of these misfortunate people who had lost limbs, had lost friends, lost, you know, legs, arms, God knows, the terrible burns. And he'd sat there with his arms folded and he never batted an eyelid. It didn't bother him. At one point in the trial, the prosecution said to Copeland, you've been corresponding with somebody called Patsy. And he went, yeah. And they said, are you aware that Patsy doesn't exist? It's actually a man called Bernard O'Mahony from Basildon. And he had his arms folded and they said he slumped forward and just put his head on the desk and it killed him, do you know what I mean? He became aware that he'd been exposed.
The jury found Copeland guilty of murder, and he was given 6 life sentences. He was sent to prison, where he remains to this day.
This is a call from Broadmoor Hospital. Please be aware that this call may be recorded.
But another hated figure did make Broadmoor his home.
Oh, God. No, Pete, how you doing?
In calls secretly recorded by his brother, Peter Sutcliffe speaks from beyond the grave.
They're on about closing down the rooms and people that talk to each other, you know.
Broadmoor might look like a prison, but it's a hospital, providing treatment for men in secure wards. All patients start on the admissions ward, but where they go next depends on how ill they are and how well they're behaving.
If people are acutely unwell or a bit disturbed in their behaviour, then obviously the wards are quite tightly controlled. There aren't many activities you can have. Whereas for a more settled patient, you want as much activity as possible, and the atmosphere day to day is a very orderly, peaceful, calm one.
Former patient Joshua was sent to Kent House, a relatively relaxed ward.
They called me in one day, the doctor, and he said to me, look, he said, you've done so well, we're going to send you to what they call assertive rehab. So you're assertive in your actions, you do more to take care of yourself. You can choose to go to your room, or you can go to the television room or the games room. You know, you'll have medication at set times, you'll have meals at set times, but you'll be able to make a cup of tea when you want. You'll be able to go to main shops, like work areas, things like that. You have more freedoms. You know, that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's a carrot and a stick. The better you behave yourself, the more rewards you can get. And hopefully we can train this person into exhibiting better behaviour through that carrot approach.
Whichever ward a patient ends up in, they could be living at close quarters with some of Britain's most hated men. For over 30 years, the hospital was home to serial killer Peter Sutcliffe.
He called me Bob, and I called him Peter. That's as much as I can say, I think.
We knew what he'd done. We'd seen enough newsreels of it. He was quite insular. He was never a mixer. He didn't play pool or card games. And then gradually he became accepted and would like just chat, nothing more. He frightened me to start with because his eyes were like looking into a shark. There was no life there at all.
Like all Broadmoor patients, Sutcliffe was encouraged to maintain contact with family on the outside. Every week he would call his brother Carl,
Hello?
who was secretly recording their conversations.
This is a call from Broadmoor Hospital. Please be aware that this call may be recorded.
We had to supervise phone calls. So he would say, can you put my name down for a 7 o'clock phone call? And you went into a little booth with the 2 glass panes so that people could see you were okay. And then latterly it was headphones, but I'd monitor it and write down nothing untoward. And your phone call, Pete, we're going. And he was okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, but you just got to find your way back. The big, big world, but you got it, baby, babe. Find your way back, don't let this life drive you crazy. Find your way back, come back home for the streetlights on. Find your way back, find your way back. Daddy used to teach me all my moves. Run around, I had to tie my shoes. Itty bitty child with a smile like you. Wow, wow, child look a lot like you. Daddy used to teach me all my tricks. Run around, I had to get my fix. Daddy used to teach me all my plays. On a marathon, had to run my race. Find your way back, big, big world, but you got it, baby, babe. Find your way back, don't let this life drive you crazy. Find your way back, come back home for the streetlights on. Find your way back, yeah.
Hello, Carl.
Hi, Pete. How you doing?
How are you doing? All right? Are you all right? Yeah?
Yeah, not too bad.
I'm on about closing down the rooms for an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon, so that we'll have to sit in the day room. Trying to encourage more people to talk to each other, you know.
I suppose it's a good idea, really. You can get a bit into a routine.
With no release date in sight, Sutcliffe's thoughts turned to life as a pensioner in Broadmoor.
What's been happening with you then?
Oh, not a lot. I'm conducting my own legal case now. For my pension case, because I couldn't get legal aid for it. So I took it on myself, you know, no solicitor or anything. I've just sent them 50 quid for a special document, you know.
He tried persistently to get his state pension, telling the world, or anybody who cared to listen, that I worked hard in my life and I paid my taxes, so why can't I have my pension?
Yeah, because there's about 70,000 quid at stake, you know.
Bloody hell.
When he asked to get his state pension, he pointed out specifically, this is a hospital, not a prison. I'm therefore entitled to my pension. There would have been the most enormous public outcry, because after all, Sutcliffe was living at the taxpayer's expense, 3 square meals a day, no need to pay board or lodging. Why on earth should he be entitled to his state pension?
Sutcliffe didn't get his pension, but he was trusted enough to be allowed the mundane task of collecting fellow patients' food orders, which would then be delivered to former head chef Neil Wheatcroft.
It's a meal order for all the patients on that ward, compiled by our friend, the Ripper Man did that on this ward in 1990. He would go round in the mornings and ask them what they wanted, and they told him, and then he gave it to the nurse to send off to us at the kitchen.
Hospital food is famously bland, but Broadmoor's menu caters for a wide range of palates. And with recovery taking years for many patients here, food takes on a new meaning in their lives.
One of the greatest delights a patient can experience is the delight of food. You can never speak to somebody who is on the inside, so to speak, and talk about food and come away thinking about food the same way. You'll appreciate it at a far greater level.
Food in prison's terrible, but the food in Broadmoor, by comparison, that was like being in a hotel.
Up to 8 choices per meal. Very big portions. Pretty wholesome food. Fresh meats, fresh fish, cheeses, things like that. It was all pretty wholesome. Like a chicken in a hospital would do 8 people. This would do 4, so it's, yeah, difference.
Infamous long-term patient Ronnie Cray had some specific requests when it came to his diet in Broadmoor.
We asked if we could take him in sausages, but you couldn't take in the sausages. He had to have their sausages, which he said was not nice. So we had a little talk, Charlie Cray, to the chef, and I said, he likes Cumberland sausages, good sausage. He said, well, they don't supply us with them. Charlie Cray said, he'll pay for them. From then on, he had Cumberland sausages in Broadmoor, whatever he wanted.
But in a high-secure environment, even mundane activities like mealtimes come with risks.
Every single item of cutlery had to be accounted for. When they finished their meal, all the cutlery would be collected back up, washed, and put back into the boxes. It may seem innocuous, but one of the worst things to be missing was a teaspoon, because the handle of the teaspoons could be made into an impromptu knife. So it'd have a very sharp point, but it'd have the base of the teaspoon, which would be placed under the fingers, inside the hand, and that could be used to stab. So when a teaspoon was unaccounted for, we had to search everybody. There was a particular patient who used to swallow cutlery as a regular feature, more because of his mental health condition rather than his desire to pass out a weapon. And we were taken sometimes to the hospital infirmary, and they'd show us x-rays of his stomach with all these knives and forks and spoons in there. But it was more the fear during that mealtime that an item would go missing, and then you would just take as long as you had to take to find that item of cutlery. And if you didn't find it, that was quite a nervous time for us on the ward, because you didn't know whether you were going to get, you know, knifed in the back or whatever.
In between meals, patients attend classes and workshops, including therapy, art, drama, and music.
Everybody had a timetable. We would aim to keep the timetable reasonably full. Not saying every minute of the day was occupied, but again, how do you guarantee security on a ward like that? Part of it is keeping people busy.
There's quite a lot of activities. There's the shop to go to once a week. There's a swimming pool. There's a gym. There's a metal workshop, ceramic shop. You've got a woodwork shop, electrical shop. You've got a DIY shop, kitchen gardens. There's animal husbandry, so you can look after the rabbits and the chickens.
But whatever activities patients are doing, their behaviour is monitored for signs of progress or anything of concern, even if this is just watching TV.
They're obviously watching TV with staff, so you would certainly notice any odd behaviour. You know, and that's why some people can find the hospital environment oppressive, because there's never any real free time. You're watching TV with a nurse. You'd never be watching TV in a group without a nurse present. So any behaviour you display is sort of, it can be put into the mix of how you're getting on.
For one Broadmoor patient, the journey to recovery would result in a shocking confession, one that would unmask him as a double killer.
He said, and I quote, "It's so hard to live within my head. I fear I might do it again."
Hastings, January 1998. The bodies of two vulnerable women are found in their homes. They've been strangled and burnt.
It's a horrifying crime. They lived a matter of yards apart from one another.
For 10 years, the violent murders of Claire Letchford and Beryl O'Connor went unsolved. But in 2008, in a therapy room inside Broadmoor Hospital, a confession would blow the case open. For patients at Broadmoor Hospital, treatment is everything, because no one can leave until they've made progress.
The whole idea of the hospital is to help people recover. Yeah? So there's no hospital without recovery. I know people who have put their heels in and refuse to do any therapy, and they don't move on. I did mine, and I got out.
But the therapeutic journey is no walk in the park. Over the decades, patients have endured all sorts of treatments, like insulin shock therapy, electroconvulsive therapy. But today, for mental illness, treatment most often begins with medication.
Medication is incredibly important. It really is one of the heartening things to see in psychiatry, the treatment of schizophrenia with antipsychotics. These are not just tranquilizers, they're very specific antipsychotic, anti-schizophrenic medications. And in 90% of cases of schizophrenia, they're going to produce an improvement, often a very dramatic improvement.
I mean, it would be quite unlikely that people with a psychosis, schizophrenia, would be able to manage without any medication.
Very quickly after starting the medication, I started to relax, my thoughts started to slow down, I started to become more self-aware.
But while medication can bring relief, it can also lead to horrific side effects.
The first time they prescribed anything for me, it was haloperidol, which is an old-style antipsychotic. It caused what I suppose you might call it a convulsion, maybe. I physically bent in half. I was bent double, I couldn't stand up straight. And I went into the office and I had to prise myself up into an upright position by leaning against the door frame and physically pushing my head up to the degree where I could talk to them and say, look, every time I let go of my head, it does this, and I let go and my head's gone straight back down. It was very disconcerting.
Medication is just the starting point of treatment. Once the symptoms of mental illness are under control, patients must engage in talking therapies.
When you think about therapy, any therapy really, we're talking about the possibilities of change. My first thought is How did this person come to do this? Really, what's happened?
The recovery journey that Broadmoor patients must go on is to face up to their crimes and make sure they never happen again.
Understanding the harm that you've caused to people in the community is a key part of being at Broadmoor. Understanding what you've done and why it was wrong and how it's affected other people.
Usually, those leading the therapy know patients index crimes in grim detail.
One of the things that I disciplined myself to do was to look at the entire story of the crime. I would see all the police reports, I would see the photographs of the scene of crime, so that I was under no illusions about what had happened.
But occasionally, a therapy session can unlock dark secrets. When Graham Fisher arrived in Broadmoor in 2001, his index crime was the indecent assault of 2 students at knife point. But after 7 years in treatment, he made a shocking confession to his doctor.
Graham Fisher confessed to targeting lonely and vulnerable women.
Graham Fisher had committed 2 murders in Hastings in East Sussex in 1998.
Following on from committing the murders, he set fire to their properties as well.
After 10 years of silence, Fisher revealed he'd killed these 2 vulnerable women as part of a wider campaign of terror.
Not only did he kill 2 women who lived alone, he then proceeded to attack a woman on a train from Hastings to London.
But his grim revelations didn't end there.
One of the things that Fisher liked to claim during his confession to the crimes is that the younger of his victims, a 40-year-old, that he'd not only killed her, but he'd eaten part of her arm. And that the police found other parts of her in a frying pan on the stove.
Fisher's confession may have been shocking, but it also marked progress in his rehabilitation.
One of the things that Fisher said to the psychiatrist during the confession was, he said, and I quote, "It's so hard to live with in my head." And that was at the same time he said, "I think I'm too dangerous to be let out."
They call that particular part victim empathy. And I mean, that's quite profound when you break it down and understand that here is an individual who's done you no wrong as far as you know, and your actions have incurred a loss to them. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but the hope is that it will ensure you don't repeat that.
When you can start to have a conversation with somebody where their view of their problems is closer to the clinician's view, then you're making progress.
Fisher remains in Broadmoor to this day.
And indeed, that is really the story of Graham Fisher, that he settled in to Broadmoor, that this was my family, my home. He ballooned in weight while he was there, I think ending up at 23 stone, enormous man, and even had a gastric band operation on the NHS, which cost the taxpayer £15,000 so that he could lose weight. And now, by all accounts, he's very happy. He's become a chef, and he likes cooking all sorts of things, including chicken curry, and he's become assimilated into the Broadmoor community.
Some Broadmoor patients will never be well enough to live back in the community, but Joshua is living proof that Broadmoor's treatment program can work.
So, through prison, leading up to prison, the whole world's against me. Get to hospital, and the whole world's helping me. That, in a nutshell, is responsible for my recovery. They gave me my life back, where other people had taken it.
Next time, While some patients make progress and prepare for release, for Broadmoor's most acutely unwell, it's a distant dream. They are sent to the intensive care ward.
You'd give warning you were going in. You then go through like an airlock.
The fact is they are secluded in a locked room for their own and others' safety.
Broadmoor's most secure ward was formerly known as Norfolk House.
There was no natural light. There would be a mattress on the floor, no bedding, chamber pot, and that would be it.
And it was the most secret and feared place in Broadmoor.
He said he would never, ever, ever want to go there again. It absolutely terrified him.
Catch all that brand new next Monday at 10. And if you or someone you know has been affected by any of the issues raised in tonight's programme, please go to channel5.com/helplines for information and support. What's it like to survive serial killer John Sweeney? Delia Balmer tells her story. Brand new true crime tomorrow at 10. Next, 999 Critical Condition.